Attention. If you thought the story of was intense, prepare for this immersion into ambition, regret, and revenge. This is a warning. What you are about to read is not a fairy tale. It is the anatomy of a collapse. Imagine the sky over London has burst into tears. Rain lashes furiously against the glass windows of the Ritz Hotel, blurring the iconic silhouettes of Piccadilly Circus and Trafalgar Square into a watercolor of silver and gold lights. Inside the presidential suite, Ethan Cole, the real estate magnate who conquered the skies of the British capital with his glass towers, raises a crystal champagne flute, the bubbles catching the gleam of an antique chandelier. Facing him, Sabrina Voss, the seductive PR executive from the rival company, laughs softly, her red lips brushing the rim of her glass. The air between them vibrates with a toxic mix of danger, perfume, and betrayal. Ethan told himself it was just a night to celebrate the deal that made him a multimillionaire again. A harmless escape from the pressure, from the echoes of a baby's cry in his mind. To freedom, Sabrina whispered, clinking her glass against his. Her eyes shone like molten amber. Ethan didn't realize that at that precise moment, freedom came with a price far exceeding his wealth. His phone buzzed on the marble countertop. A text message from his wife, Clara, flashed briefly on the screen. "Baby has a fever. Please come home." He flipped the phone over. Sabrina's hand slid over his. Music thumped faintly from the next room, and outside, a clap of thunder split the London sky. Hours later, the suite was silent, permeated with champagne and regret. Sabrina slept deeply under silk sheets, while Ethan stood by the window, watching the lightning crawl across the city. For a fleeting second, he thought of Clara's soft voice, her tired eyes, the way she used to whisper, "I believe in you," before every big meeting. But belief had long been replaced by ambition. He convinced himself he would make it up to her tomorrow. When dawn broke, he left the hotel, his head pounding and his tie loose around his neck. The streets of Mayfair shimmered with morning rain. He stopped at a cafe, ordered a black coffee, and stared at his reflection in the glass door. An expensive suit, sunken eyes, a stranger looking back. When he arrived at his luxury penthouse, the air felt strange, too quiet. No cooing from the baby's room, no scent of baby lotion or fresh coffee. His gut twisted. "Clara!" he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. Silence. Then he saw the crib. Empty. The baby's blanket folded neatly on the rocking chair. His heart hammered when he noticed the envelope on the countertop, her handwriting painfully familiar. He tore it open. Inside was a single page and the house key. The words were short, shaky, but clear. "Last night, while you were with her, our son's fever reached 39 degrees. I waited for you. I finally understood I was waiting for a man who no longer exists." The key slipped from his hand, hitting the marble with a sharp, hollow sound. Rain streamed down the window like tears. His phone buzzed again. It was Sabrina texting. Last night was unforgettable. Ethan dropped to his knees, realizing the truth too late. His wife and newborn son were gone, and with them, everything that had ever made him human. Chapter 1. The Predator's Ruin. The elevator doors opened to silence. Ethan entered his London penthouse, a space once filled with warmth, laughter, and the soft humming of a lullaby. Now it felt like a mausoleum. The faint scent of baby powder lingered in the air, cruelly mixing with the sterile coldness of the marble floors. His expensive shoes echoed with every step, reverberating through the emptiness around him. "Clara!" His voice shook. No answer, only the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant rumble of thunder. He called her name again, louder this time, but the only reply was the hollow echo of his own voice. On the dining table, a half-filled baby bottle, cold and untouched. Next to it, a framed photo of the three of them, taken just 2 weeks prior in Hyde Park. Clara's smile was soft, tired, but radiant. Ethan remembered that day vividly. She had joked about him never changing diapers, and he had laughed, promising he would start tomorrow. There would be no tomorrow. Not anymore. Panic surged. He grabbed his phone, dialing her number over and over, going straight to voicemail. He called the hospital. No recent admissions. He called her best friend. No answer. Every second felt heavier, as if the walls were closing in. He stumbled into the baby's room, a place Clara had painted herself in soft shades of blue and cream. The rocking chair creaked slightly, swaying from the draft of the open window. On the dresser, his wedding ring gleamed next to a folded note. The handwriting was hers. Calm, deliberate, final. "Don't look for us. You already chose who you are." His breath hitched. For the first time in years, Ethan Cole, the man who conquered the London skyline, felt helpless. He sank onto the nursery floor, clutching the note. The city that once bowed to him now loomed as an indifferent giant beyond the glass. A knock startled him. He opened the door to find his assistant, Ben, holding a tablet. "Sir, we have a problem," he said cautiously. "The press just ran a story about last night. Photos. You and Sabrina at the Ritz." Ethan froze. "What?" Ben showed him the screen. The headline screamed, "Property tycoon parties with mystery woman while wife cares for newborn." Below, a photo of Ethan and Sabrina laughing, champagne glasses raised, the city glittering behind them. His stomach churned. Within minutes, his phone exploded. Calls from investors, board members, journalists. His empire shuddered. Years of reputation undone overnight. Sabrina had promised discretion, but she had also recorded everything. He could already hear her voice from the night before. Sweet, rehearsed, dangerous. "Relax, Ethan. No one ever has to know." Now, everyone knew. He stumbled to the liquor cabinet and poured a glass of whiskey. His hands trembled so badly the liquid spilled over the counter. On the floor, near the door, lay a small blue sock belonging to his son. He picked it up, pressing it against his face, the scent of baby powder hitting him like a knife. For a moment he imagined Clara there, whispering softly, "He needs you." But all he heard was the echo of his own choices. A storm brewed over the city, lightning crisscrossing the horizon like judgment. His reflection in the window glass looked alien. Bloodshot eyes, disheveled tie, vacant face. Ethan Cole had built skyscrapers, bought MPs, and bent markets to his will. But now he couldn't even find his wife. And somewhere deep inside, he knew this was only the beginning of his punishment. Black Pawn, Chapter 2. Revenge is served cold. On Fifth Avenue, the morning light filtered through the tall windows of Sabrina Voss's luxurious New York City apartment on Fifth Avenue. She considered London just a stepping stone. The place smelled of vanilla candles and victory. She sat cross-legged on a cream sofa, scrolling through her phone as the headlines about Ethan's scandal exploded online. Her lips curved into a smirk. "Poor Clara," she muttered mockingly, stirring her oat milk latte. She never understood the kind of man she married. Ethan stood near the window, his jaw clenched, staring out at the city that once adored him. Every news outlet ran the same story. Multimillionaire Ethan Cole's secret night at the plaza. Photos of him with Sabrina at the bar, laughing, her touching his hand. His board called non-stop. His investors demanded an explanation. "Is this your idea of discretion?" Ethan snapped. His voice resonated off the marble floors. Sabrina didn't even flinch. "Relax, Ethan. The media forgets faster than they forgive. A few donations, some interviews about mental health and pressure. You'll be the misunderstood genius next week." Ethan glared at her, feeling a wave of disgust. You don't understand. Clara is gone with my son. Do you understand that? Sabrina finally looked up, feigning sympathy. You told me she was fragile. Maybe she finally broke. Ethan's hand slammed against the wall. You think this is funny? She smiled. I think it's ironic. You wanted freedom, didn't you? Well, now you have it. Her phone buzzed, and she angled it toward him. It was a message from an anonymous source. The offer still stands. $500,000 for the footage. Below the text was a blurred thumbnail. Ethan shirtless, kissing her shoulder at the plaza. He froze. You recorded me? Sure, darling, she said softly, setting the phone aside. You're not the first man to promise a paradise and deliver betrayal. I learned to protect myself. Ethan stepped toward her, rage burning in his eyes. Delete it or what? Or what? She whispered, rising to meet his height. You'll hit me? You'll threaten me? You might have scared your wife with that billionaire tone, but I'm not her. I'm the one who knows what you look like when you're weak. Ethan's breathing grew heavy. He spun around, pacing the room, running both hands through his hair. Every second near her felt poisonous. His phone rang. It was his CFO. He answered quickly, his voice tight. Ethan, the man said nervously. We have a situation. Someone just sold internal documents to Holt Capital. They're staging a hostile takeover. We're bleeding shares minute by minute. Stop! Raymond Holt, Ethan muttered. Yes, and there's more. The documents came from your private server. It was accessed under the credentials of Sabrina Voss. Ethan's gaze snapped back to her. Sabrina was smiling, calm, almost proud. You sold me out, he said in disbelief. She shrugged. Business, darling. Holt offered me protection and options. You offered me lies. He stared at her as realization dawned. Clara hadn't been the only one planning an escape. He had been living in a web woven by every lie he had told. He grabbed his jacket, heading for the door. This isn't over. Sabrina's voice followed him like silk and venom. Oh, yes it is, Ethan. You just haven't accepted it yet. The elevator doors closed behind him, trapping his reflection in the mirrored walls. Tie crooked, face pale, eyes burning with fear. For the first time in his life, Ethan Cole was not the predator. He was the prey. And as the elevator descended, he knew one thing with chilling certainty. Sabrina Voss had just destroyed him in exactly the same way he had destroyed Clara. Chapter 3. The Planned Escape and the Mysterious Protector. The rain turned to sleet as Ethan Cole's black Mercedes roared through the night, his headlights cutting across the empty motorways leading north. The wipers thumped like a frantic heartbeat. He hadn't slept for 3 days. Every mile he drove felt like a confession. Somewhere beyond the freezing horizon were Clara and the child he had never truly known. He gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles were white. His phone, mounted on the dashboard, showed the last trace of her credit card usage. A bookstore in Porto, Portugal. She had always loved bookstores, the small, quiet ones where people still spoke in hushed tones, as if faith hadn't died out. He remembered once teasing her for buying paperbacks instead of reading on her iPad. Some things are worth feeling in your hands, she had told him. He hadn't understood it then. He did now. The lights of the city of Porto appeared in the distance, muted, fog-shrouded, indifferent. He parked opposite a brick bookstore named Páginas del Puerto and stepped out into the cold, salt-scented air. Inside, a woman with silver hair looked up from the counter. "Can I help you?" she asked. He showed her a photo of Clara on his phone. "She was here 3 days ago. Did she say where she was going?" The woman hesitated, her eyes softening. She had a baby with her. She bought a few books. Good Night, Moon, and a copy of Women Who Run with the Wolves. She paid cash. She asked about rentals near the coast. Ethan's chest tightened. Did she leave a number? No. But she looked determined. like someone who wasn't coming back. He left the shop. The snow was falling harder now, coating the street in silence. The private investigator he had hired called a few minutes later. "Cole, you're not going to like this," the man said. "Your wife's car was found abandoned near Vigo, a coastal city in Galicia, Spain. No trace of her or the baby. Just static crackled before Ethan heard it. A baby crying. Faint but real. Where did that come from? Dash cam footage from a local delivery truck. Time stamped. The same night she disappeared. She was talking to a man before getting into another vehicle. Plates are impossible to trace. A man. Ethan's pulse spiked. Who? We don't know yet. But whoever it is, they're smart. Every digital trace of her vanished an hour after she met him. Bank accounts emptied. Phone wiped. GPS turned off. She didn't just leave, Cole. She erased herself. The call ended, leaving Ethan alone with the sound of the wind howling from the Atlantic. He looked out at the black waves crashing against the rocks. He realized Clara hadn't fled out of fear. She had planned it. Someone had helped her. Back in London, the world was reveling in his downfall. Sabrina had leaked another video clip, him whispering in her ear at the Ritz. "The wife is sleeping, darling," he had said in that recording. A line now plastered across every tabloid headline. His board voted to permanently remove him. His accounts were frozen. Journalists camped outside his penthouse, shouting questions about Clara's disappearance. He ignored them all, staring at the only trace he had left, a baby sock found in his SUV. He kept it in his pocket now, like a confession he couldn't escape. At midnight, a new email popped into his inbox. No sender, no subject. Just one sentence. "You taught me that power can destroy everything. Now you will learn what it feels like to lose it." Attached was a photo. Clara standing on a seaside cliff, the wind whipping her hair, her baby wrapped in her arms. She looked strong, free, untouchable. Ethan's throat tightened. For the first time in his life, the man who conquered London realized he might never get her back. Chapter 4. The story of a broken anchor. Long before Ethan Cole became the ruthless name featured in business magazines, he was just a broken man lying in a hospital bed, staring at ceiling tiles he couldn't count. 7 years prior, a car crash had left him with 2 fractured ribs and a shattered collarbone. The night it happened, he had been driving too fast in the London rain, furious after losing a deal. Fate, cruel and calculated, had brought him to St. Thomas's Hospital, and to her, Clara Morgan. She was not like the women Ethan was used to. No designer heels, no champagne laughter. Her hair was pulled back in a messy bun, strands falling over her forehead as she checked his IV. She smelled faintly of lavender and antiseptic. "You're lucky," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "The car is totaled, but your heart is still beating. Try to keep it that way." He smiled despite the pain. "Do you always talk to your patients like that?" "Only the arrogant ones," she replied, scribbling notes on his chart. For the first time in years, someone looked at him and didn't see money or power. They saw a man who was bleeding, scared, and stubborn. During his 3-week recovery, she became his anchor. They talked at night when the city outside went quiet. She told him about her childhood in Cornwall, how she had lost her mother to illness, how she worked double shifts to pay for nursing school. He told her nothing about business, only his dreams of one day building something that mattered. On his last day, he tried to slip her an envelope of cash, a thank you for her kindness. She refused. "Gratitude cannot be bought, Mr. Cole. Some things are just felt." He watched her walk away, that quiet confidence etched into his memory. Months later, he showed up at her hospital with flowers and a simple request. Coffee. She hesitated, but said yes. That coffee turned into dinners, laughter, and long walks through Regent's Park. By the following spring, she was Mrs. Clara Cole. In the early years, their love was a sacred thing. They lived in a modest flat in Notting Hill, eating Chinese takeout on the floor, laughing over nothing. She used to draw little hearts on his napkins before he left for work. "Don't forget why you started," she would whisper. But the higher Ethan climbed, the less he looked down to see who was holding the ladder. Now, sitting in the darkness of a roadside motel near Vigo, he relived those memories like a confession. He could almost hear her voice. Gratitude cannot be bought. The same woman who once healed him was now the one surgically destroying him. His phone buzzed again. Another blow. His lawyer texted, "Your wife removed your name from the joint trust fund. The transfer was made to a C. Morgan Foundation." He stared at the message, realizing the truth like sinking ice. That was her maiden name. She hadn't fled. She had rebuilt her identity. She had learned from the man who taught her everything about control and used those lessons against him. He poured another drink, but the whiskey burned like the truth. The woman he once saved had become the one who saved herself. A knock echoed on the thin motel walls. Ethan froze. He opened the door to find a package tossed onto the floor. No return address. Inside was a single photograph. Clara smiling, holding their baby in front of a small clinic by the ocean. On the back, in her handwriting, "You once said you wanted to build something that mattered. I did." The photo slipped from his hand as his chest constricted with a pain deeper than guilt. Chapter 5. Sabrina's Secret and the Family's Judgment. The morning after receiving Clara's photograph, Ethan Cole woke to the sound of his own breathing. Shallow, uneasy, human. The motel room was dark, smelling of damp carpet and stale whiskey. He hadn't slept. Guilt had replaced exhaustion as his companion. On the nightstand was the photo of Clara and his son, both smiling under gray skies, framed by a hand-painted sign. The Portside Clinic. He picked it up again, studying every line of her face. There was something new in her eyes. Strength. A quiet, unbreakable kind of power he had never seen. It terrified him. His phone buzzed. Sabrina's name flashed on the screen. He ignored it. It buzzed again and again, until he finally answered. "What do you want?" he growled. "Relax," Sabrina purred. "I'm just calling to check on you. You've gone dark. Bad for business." "There is no business left," he snapped. "Oh, there's always business," she said. Especially when there's a baby involved." Ethan froze. "What did you say?" Sabrina's tone shifted. Smooth. Deliberate. "You think you're the only one with secrets, Ethan? You think your wife is the only woman who can disappear?" He gripped the phone tighter. "If you're hinting at what I think you're hinting at." "I'm not hinting," she cut in. "I'm telling you, I'm pregnant." Silence swallowed the line. It felt like a bullet had exploded behind his ribs. "That's impossible," he said quietly. "You're lying." "Maybe," she said, her smile audible over the phone. "But imagine what the tabloids would do with this story. Disgraced magnate impregnates mistress while wife vanishes with newborn. It writes itself, doesn't it?" Ethan's knuckles turned white around the phone. "What do you want?" "A deal," she said softly. $5 million? I'll disappear, shut up, and the world never needs to know you're a double monster." He laughed bitterly. "Do you really think I have that kind of money left? Holt is wiping me clean." "Oh, I know," she said. "That's why I also took the liberty of sending our little video to him. Let's just say he pays better than you." The line went dead. Ethan stared at his reflection in the cracked mirror above the sink. His reflection was unfamiliar. Sunken eyes, 5 o'clock shadow. A suit that once cost £3,000 now hung loosely on his frame. He saw the man Clara used to love buried beneath the arrogance and greed, and he hated what looked back. A notification flashed on his phone. "Breaking news. Raymond Holt expands holdings, acquires Cole Realty subsidiary. It was official. The empire he built from nothing now belonged to the man he had once begged for a job. The man who, rumors suggested, had dated Clara before she met Ethan. The world, it seemed, had a cruel sense of irony. Later that night, there was a knock on his door. He opened it, expecting reporters. Instead, it was a courier holding a brown envelope. No name, no return address. Inside, a single sheet of paper read, "You built your kingdom on betrayal. Now watch it crumble, one lie at a time." Attached was a USB stick. He plugged it into his laptop. Dozens of files popped up. Board communications, financial transfers, insider trading evidence. Sabrina's voice was faintly heard on the first recording. "He doesn't care who he ruins, Raymond. Just make sure he never breathes the same air as her again." Ethan's stomach churned. His sins had come full circle. Every lie he had told now had a voice, every secret, a witness. As he sat there, his face illuminated by the screen's glow, he realized the cruelest truth of all. He wasn't just betrayed. He had trained his betrayers. The enemy in his mirror had multiplied. Chapter 6. The reveal in the snow's silence. Snow fell in thick, silent sheets outside Ethan's motel room window. The world outside was white and unforgiving, like a blank page, daring him to start over. He hadn't eaten for 2 days. Every call to his lawyer ended in another loss. Accounts frozen, assets seized, a federal investigation pending for insider trading. The empire that once bore his name now belonged to Raymond Holt, but the pain that cut him deepest was the silence. No word from Clara, no sound of his sons crying. Just an empty phone screen that mocked him with nothingness. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, his head in his hands, when an email notification flashed on the laptop screen. The sender field was blank. The subject read, "Stop looking for her." Ethan's pulse quickened. He clicked it open. "She is safe. She doesn't need your apologies or your money. Keep looking, and I will bury every secret you've hidden. You taught her how to survive. She learned better than you think." Below the text was a single attached file, a photo. Clara stood on a cliff overlooking the ocean, bundled in a dark coat, the baby in her arms. Behind her, a man stood slightly out of frame. Broad shoulders. Familiar posture. Ethan zoomed in until his heart stopped. It was Michael Reed, Clara's older brother. Memories hit like glass fragments. Michael had been there the night Ethan proposed, shaking his hand reluctantly. He had been at their wedding, whispering to Clara during the vows, "Don't let him turn you into a trophy." Ethan had dismissed him, calling him overprotective. Now, that same man held his wife's life in his hands. The phone rang, vibrating violently against the nightstand. A blocked number. Ethan hesitated, then answered, still trying to act like the savior. A deep voice said, "Michael, where is she?" Ethan demanded. "You have no right." Michael cut him off. "I have every right. You lost yours when you chose a hotel room over your family." "You don't understand," Ethan retorted. "I made a mistake." "No," Michael interrupted coldly. "You created a pattern." Ethan's throat tightened. "Please, I just want to see my son." There was silence on the line. Then Michael's voice softened, almost pitying. "Your son doesn't need to see what a man looks like when he's destroying himself. Clara built something here. She's helping people again. She's happy." Ethan pressed his hand against his forehead. "If she's happy, then why the threats? Why the games?" "Because you don't quit, Ethan. You never have. So I'm giving you a reason to." "Holt, what do you mean? Remember the charity fund you used to move accounts offshore? The one in Holt's name?" Ethan froze. "That's sealed." "Not anymore," Michael said. "I have copies of everything. If you follow her again, I'll leak it to every media outlet in the country. Holt, Sabrina, the SEC. Everyone will see what kind of man you truly are. Ethan felt his stomach clench. You're blackmailing me. No, Michael said. I'm protecting her. Someone should have a long time ago. The line went dead. For a long moment, Ethan simply stood there, staring into the darkness. The only sound was the wind rattling the thin windows. He finally understood. Clara hadn't disappeared out of fear. She had escaped under protection. She had allies, people who had learned to fight the monster he had become. Outside, a black SUV was parked across the street. A silhouette sat inside, watching. Ethan moved toward the window, but before he could blink, the vehicle's lights flared and it sped away into the snow. He realized then that Michael wasn't lying. Clara was somewhere nearby, and every step Ethan took toward her would lead him face to face, not with her forgiveness, but with his own destruction. Chapter 7. The Confrontation and the Forced Confession. London looked crueler under the winter light. Sharp, metallic, soulless. Ethan Cole walked into his former office on Canary Wharf like a ghost, returning to the scene of his own execution. Cameras flashed outside the revolving doors. Reporters shouted questions about bankruptcy, betrayal, and missing wives. He ignored them all. Inside, the marble lobby that once bore his initials now featured a shiny silver plaque. Holt Capital Realty. Raymond Holt had officially won. The receptionist, a young woman who once leaped to greet him, now avoided his eyes. Mr. Holt is unavailable, she muttered. Ethan smiled bitterly. He will be, darling. He pushed through the glass doors of the executive boardroom. Holt stood at the head of the table, hands in his pockets, watching the snow fall over London. His suit was impeccable, his calm unnerving. You're either brave or desperate to walk in here, Cole, he said, without turning around. Perhaps both, Ethan replied. But this isn't about us anymore. It's about Clara. Holt finally faced him, raising an eyebrow. You mean the woman you shattered? Ethan swallowed. Someone is trying to destroy her foundation. They're linking it to my old offshore accounts. If the story goes public, she'll lose everything she's built. Holt studied him for a long moment, then smiled. You sound sincere. That's new. I'm not asking for forgiveness, Ethan said. I'm asking for help. Holt poured 2 glasses of whiskey and offered him one. You're late. The leak didn't come from me. It came from Sabrina Voss. Ethan's grip tightened. She's working with someone. Holt nodded. A senator's aide. They're mutually blackmailing each other, using you as collateral. Sabrina is demanding $5 million to bury the evidence. Typical of her. Ethan's stomach churned. If this gets out, Clara's name will be dragged through the mud. She doesn't deserve that. Holt leaned in, his voice low. I didn't deserve for you to steal her from me 7 years ago either. Boom! The words hit harder than Ethan expected. You think I planned any of this? I think you were blinded by ego, but maybe, Holt swirled the whiskey, maybe you finally learned what it costs to be human. Then help me, Ethan said quietly. Not for me, for her. Holt sighed. I'll make some calls, but if Sabrina isn't lying, she won't stop until someone stops her for good. Ethan left the building, his pulse racing. Holt's words echoed in his head. The streets were slick with ice, the neon lights reflecting in the puddles like broken glass. He walked for hours, his mind reeling with guilt and fury, until his phone buzzed. A message from Sabrina Voss, still playing the hero. Meet me at the Langham. Midnight. Bring what's left of your soul. He arrived at the hotel just before midnight. Sabrina waited for him at the bar, dressed in black, her eyes shining like polished obsidian. You look terrible, she said, sipping her martini. Redemption doesn't suit you. He sat across from her. You're dragging Clara into this now. She has nothing to do with you. Sabrina leaned forward. Oh, but she has everything to do with me. You left me for her long before you ever slept with me. Ethan frowned. What are you talking about? I wanted to be the woman who could save you, she said, her voice shaking slightly for the first time, almost human. But she already was. You just didn't realize it until it was too late. Ethan stared at her, realizing that beneath the venom, there was truth. I won't pay you anything, he said. Release the files, and I'll expose myself. The world will know I lied, that I cheated, that I ruined her. But I'll also make sure everyone knows you did too. Sabrina's smile faltered. You wouldn't dare. I already did, he said, Deb standing up. Check your email. Her eyes darted to her phone. The color drained from her face as she read the subject line. Confession of a Broken Man, by Ethan Cole. He had leaked his own story to the press before she could. For the first time, she looked small. You just torched your empire, she whispered. Ethan nodded. Exactly. Now you have nothing left to blackmail me with. He walked out of the Langham without looking back, the sound of glass shattering echoing behind him. Outside, the snow fell again, but for the first time, it didn't feel cold. Chapter 8. The Eye of the Storm and the Final Test. The storm rolled in from the Atlantic like punishment itself, violent, unforgiving, and deafening. The sky over the Cornwall coast was a bruise of gray and silver. Waves pounded the cliffs with the fury of something ancient. In the small seaside cabin, Clara Cole rocked her son as thunder rattled the windows. Every flash of lightning illuminated the walls, where shadows danced like ghosts of her past. Michael burst through the door, soaked to the bone. The bridge is flooding, he said, placing a flashlight on the table. We'll lose power soon. I called the village, but the roads are already closing. Clara tried to stay calm, but the baby was crying. A high-pitched, frightened wail that cut through the wind's howl. She rocked him gently, whispering, It's okay, Noah. Mommy's here. Yet even as she said it, she wasn't sure she believed it. The lights flickered once, twice, and went out. Darkness swallowed the room. The only sound was the rain beating on the roof. Michael lit the flashlight, the golden glow trembling in his hand. We'll have to ride it out, he said. The generator is out. Clara nodded, hugging Noah tighter. How bad is it? Bad enough that no one's coming until morning. He looked at Clara, hesitating. You should rest. But sleep was impossible. Every gust of wind sounded like a warning. Every creak of the wood reminded her that danger had a way of finding her, even in the most hidden places. She sat by the window, watching the ocean that had sheltered and imprisoned her. Then, in a flash of lightning, she saw it. Headlights cutting through the rain, a car crawling up the flooded drive. Michael, she whispered, there's someone out there. He joined her at the window, his face tight. No one should be driving in this, unless... The sentence died on his lips. The car turned into their drive, tires hissing on the wet gravel. Clara's heart hammered in her chest. She recognized that shape. Sleek, black, relentless. The Mercedes. Michael grabbed his coat. Stay here, he ordered. Clara didn't move. Her hands shook as she watched him disappear into the storm. Minutes felt like hours. The rain hit harder, seeping through the roof, then screaming, muffled, distant, but unmistakable. Michael's voice. She set Noah down gently in his crib, then ran for the door. The cold hit her like knives as she stepped out into the storm, the wind nearly knocking her down. Lightning split the sky, and for a moment she saw them. Michael standing inches from another man, fists clenched, rain pouring down their faces. Ethan. He looked nothing like the man she remembered. His hair was longer, his clothes soaked and torn. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something raw. Desperation. Clara! he shouted over the wind's roar. "Please!" Michael blocked his path. "You shouldn't be here." "I needed to see her," Ethan yelled. "I didn't come to take her. I just needed to know she was alive." Clara's voice cut through the chaos. "Why now, Ethan?" He turned to her, his eyes blazing with a grief she didn't recognize. "Because I finally understand what I destroyed. I don't want forgiveness. I just want to help, if you'll let me." Another bolt of lightning struck nearby, shaking the ground. The wind screamed louder, and suddenly, the cabin roof gave way with a crash. Michael grabbed Noah's crib as debris flew. Clara screamed, searching for her son. Ethan lunged, shielding both of them with his body as part of the ceiling collapsed behind him. When the storm finally began to subside, the three of them were huddled in the corner, soaked, shivering, but alive. Noah's small hand reached up and grabbed Ethan's soaked shirt, holding on tightly. For the first time, Clara didn't pull him away. Chapter 9. Redemption is not bought, it is earned. Morning dawned pale and fragile after the storm. The sea was calmer now, though broken branches and debris littered the shore. Inside the damaged cabin, the smell of wet wood and smoke lingered. Clara sat by the fireplace, her son bundled in a blanket against her chest. Across the room, Ethan stood silently, toweling his hair dry. The bandage on his arm was new. He had been cut, saving them from the ceiling collapse. Michael leaned against the wall, staring at him. "You shouldn't have come," he said bluntly. Ethan's voice was low, but firm. "Do you think I planned to show up in a hurricane? I didn't even know I was here until the road signs disappeared behind me. I just drove north until I couldn't anymore." Michael scoffed. "So what? You thought you'd show up, play the hero, and she'd forget everything you did?" "Stop," Clara said quietly. Both men turned to her. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steady. "No more fighting. Not here. Not in front of him." She looked at Noah, who had fallen asleep against her shoulder. "He's seen enough storms." Ethan took a step closer. "Clara, I didn't come for pity or forgiveness. I came because I needed to face what I did, to see what I destroyed." She looked at him, her face pale in the morning light. "Destroy is the right word," she said softly. "Do you know what it's like to sit alone with a newborn, praying the fever breaks while your husband's phone goes to voicemail? Do you know what it's like to realize the man you trusted would rather be seen with someone else than hold his son?" Ethan's voice cracked. "Every day since then, I've relived that night. Every call I ignored, every lie I told. I don't deserve your forgiveness. I know that. But please let me at least help now. Let me be a father to him." Michael stepped forward. "You think you can just waltz back into her life and play daddy? You're lucky she didn't throw you back out into that storm." Ethan didn't flinch. "You don't have to like me. Just let me try to do one thing right." Clara's eyes glistened. "You can't undo what's been done." He nodded slowly. "No, but maybe I can prevent more harm from coming." He reached into his coat and pulled out a folder, soaked but intact. "Sabrina is trying to destroy you. She's feeding the media false information about your foundation, linking it to my old accounts. I came to warn you before it's too late." Michael snatched the folder, flipping through the pages. "This could ruin her." Clara's face paled. "She's doing this to hurt me?" Ethan shook his head. "To hurt me, you're just collateral damage." For a moment, silence filled the room, save for the crackling of the fire. Clara got up and walked toward him, her bare feet silent on the wooden floor. "You could have sent a lawyer. You didn't have to come yourself." "I couldn't let someone else protect you again," he said simply. Something in his tone broke her guard, if only for a second. He looked spent, his once proud shoulders slumped, his hands shaking slightly. This was not the man who had abandoned her for luxury. This was a man stripped of everything but regret. Michael's voice softened. "If this leak runs, the feds will investigate her too." Ethan nodded. That's why I need to go back to London. I'll take the fall. I'll sign whatever confession they want. She and the baby remain untouched. Clara blinked back tears. You'd ruin yourself for us. He smiled faintly. It's the easiest decision I've ever made. Outside, the gray sky began to clear, light filtering through the broken window. Clara watched him walk out of the cabin and climb into his car, the ocean wind whipping his hair. For the first time, she felt no hatred, only the pang of something that still refused to die. Chapter 10. Rebuilding and the Last Letter. The drive back to London took Ethan 10 hours through endless gray rain. Every mile felt heavier, a countdown to whatever reckoning awaited him at the end of the road. Holt had warned him. Once he confessed, there would be no going back. But Ethan no longer thought about his empire. He thought about Clara, a trembling voice, her eyes filled with both fury and something dangerously close to compassion. When he arrived in the city, the skyline didn't feel like home. It looked like a judgment. His old penthouse, once a beacon of wealth and pride, was now dark and empty. He checked into a cheap hotel in the Shoreditch area and spent the night drafting a confession, one that would clear Clara's name and expose his own crimes. He wrote slowly and deliberately. I, Ethan Cole, acknowledge I falsified company accounts to protect my personal holdings. The Clara Morgan Foundation had no knowledge or involvement in these transactions. Any accusations against Clara Cole result only from my deception. When he finished, he signed it and stared at the page until the ink blurred. The next morning, he handed the confession to a journalist from the Times. Publish it, he said. All of it. The woman looked startled. Are you sure? This will destroy what's left of your reputation. It's already gone, he replied. But maybe it will give her a chance to live. By noon, the story was everywhere. Ethan Cole confesses financial fraud, exonerates wife. The same networks that once celebrated his rise now devoured his fall. Reporters camped outside the courthouse, his name trending alongside words like shame and betrayal. That night, he sat on a park bench near the River Thames, the city lights reflecting in the black water. His phone buzzed with dozens of messages. Lawyers, former partners, old friends, begging him to retract his statement. He ignored them all. Then a text message from an unknown number popped up. You shouldn't have done this. Michael. Ethan hesitated, then replied. Tell her it's over. She's free. A few minutes later, the reply came. She already was. He closed his eyes, breathing in the cold wind that cut through his coat. Somewhere, he hoped Clara was sleeping, her son safe by her side. That thought alone made the ruin worthwhile, but the universe wasn't quite done with him. Just after midnight, his phone rang again. This time, it was the Vigo hospital. The nurse's voice trembled. Mr. Cole, your son was admitted an hour ago. High fever, severe infection. Mrs. Cole requested you be notified. Ethan's blood ran cold. Is he okay? He's stable, but it's critical. The nearest pediatric surgeon is in Lisbon. We're arranging emergency transport. He didn't think. He simply ran. 6 hours later, he was in the hospital corridor, disheveled, breathless, and terrified. Through the glass window of the small intensive care unit, he saw Clara sitting beside Noah's bed, holding the boy's hand. Machines beeped softly, fragile reminders of how thin the line between life and loss was. She looked up when she sensed his presence. Their eyes met across the glass. For the first time, there was no rage, only exhaustion, fear, and something deeper than either of them could name. He opened the door, and Clara didn't stop him. He walked to the bedside and gently touched his son's small arm. "Hello, little man," he whispered. "It's Dad." Noah stirred slightly, his eyelids fluttering. Clara's voice was soft but unsteady. "He's been calling for you in his sleep." Ethan swallowed. "I'm here now." The doctor walked in, explaining the situation in a rush. Noah would need immediate surgery. Ethan turned to Clara. "Let me take care of it. I'll pay for everything. Please, just let me do this one thing right." She nodded slowly, tears overflowing. "Just don't disappear again." He held her gaze. Never. That night, Ethan stayed awake beside the hospital bed, his hand resting on his son's. Every beep of the monitor was a reminder of the life he almost lost twice. And for the first time in years, he prayed. Chapter 11. The Dawn of the New Man. The surgery lasted 4 agonizing hours. Ethan paced the hallway outside the pediatric OR like a man awaiting his own verdict. Every passing second was punishment for years of selfishness. Through the glass wall, he could see the faint outline of his son's tiny body under the bright surgical lights, a sight that reduced him from Titan to nothing more than a father praying for mercy. Clara sat nearby, her hands clasped, her lips trembling in a silent prayer. The same woman he once left crying alone in their penthouse was now the strongest person in the room. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. "They said the infection spread fast. If we had come later." She trailed off, unable to finish. Ethan slumped into the seat beside her. "He's a fighter," he said softly. "He got that from you." Clara didn't look at him. "He almost didn't make it because of you. If you wouldn't," he gently cut in. I know, Clara." For a long moment, the only sound was the rhythmic hum of hospital machinery. Finally, the surgeon came out. Exhaustion was etched onto his face. "He's stable," he said. "The operation was a success. He'll need time to recover, but your son is going to be okay." The relief was so sharp it almost hurt. Clara broke down crying, covering her face with her hands. Ethan exhaled shakily, his shoulders shaking. "Thank you," he whispered. But the doctor had already moved on to the next emergency. When the nurse allowed them in, Noah was asleep under soft white sheets, his little chest rising and falling slowly. Clara sat by his bedside, stroking his hair. Ethan stood behind her, hands in his pockets, afraid to breathe too loudly. "He looks like you when he sleeps," she said softly. Ethan swallowed. "Then I'll make sure he never looks like me when he wakes up." That night, as Clara rested her head on the bed, Ethan quietly left the room. He found the hospital chapel, a small, dark space filled with flickering candles. He was not a praying man, but now he knelt, the cold tile beneath him anchoring the moment. "If you let him live," he whispered, "take what's left of me instead." It wasn't a bargain. It was a surrender. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the blinds. Noah was awake, small fingers reaching for the light. Clara smiled despite her exhaustion. Ethan stood at the foot of the bed, watching silently. When she caught his eye, she said softly, "You didn't have to stay." "I wanted to," he replied. "I needed to." "Well," Clara studied him, her eyes filled with something uncertain. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But the first glimpse of understanding. She shook her head. "You've already lost everything. You owe us nothing." He smiled faintly. "Maybe not, but I owe him everything." Over the next few weeks, Ethan remained in Galicia. He volunteered at the hospital, discreetly donating with anonymous checks. He rebuilt the storm-damaged clinic roof himself, driving nails into the wood with blistered hands. The people of the village, once wary of the haunted-eyed stranger, began to nod when he passed. One afternoon, Clara found him painting the fence outside the cabin, sleeves rolled up, the sun shining on his arm. "You're not the man I married," she said, crossing her arms. Ethan paused, lowering the brush. "I know. You're trying too hard." He turned to her, his eyes steady. "No, Clara. I'm trying just enough. For the first time in years." She smiled. Small, reluctant, but real. As she turned back toward the house, he whispered to himself. Slowly, because redemption, he was learning, never comes in a rush. It arrives in the quiet sound of a child's laughter, the weight of a hammer, and the slow forgiveness of a woman who once thought he was lost forever. Chapter 12. The Final Judgment in London. The winter sun over London did little to warm the coldness in the air. Ethan Cole stood on the steps of the courthouse, watching a crowd of reporters descend like vultures, circling the dying remnants of his past. Cameras flashed. Microphones were thrust at him. Questions flew like glass shards. Mr. Cole, is it true you surrendered your remaining assets? Did your mistress blackmail you? Are you still in contact with your wife? He said nothing. Silence was his final defense. Beside him, his lawyer whispered, "You don't have to face her in person. The deposition can be remote." Ethan shook his head. "No, I need to see it end." Inside, the courtroom was cold and sterile, filled with murmurs. At the defense table sat Sabrina Voss, immaculate as ever, but the glamour was cracking. Her once flawless skin was pale, her eyes red-rimmed from sleepless nights. She wore confidence like a costume now, one she could no longer afford. When the judge entered, all noise died. The prosecution began presenting evidence, screenshots, emails, financial transfers. Sabrina's voice recorded on a phone call played through the speakers. "If he doesn't pay, I'll make sure his wife's foundation burns with him." A gasp went through the room. Even Sabrina flinched. Ethan watched her face intently, but there was no satisfaction in seeing her crumble, only exhaustion. She had been the mirror of his worst self, greedy, manipulative, empty. When it was his turn to testify, Ethan rose slowly. "I am not here to destroy her," he said quietly. "We both built our lives on deceit. The difference is that I stopped." The judge raised an eyebrow. "And why should the court believe that, Mr. Cole?" "Because I've already lost everything worth lying for." Sabrina's lawyer tried to counter, but the evidence was overwhelming. The leaked files, the blackmail payments, the offshore accounts in her name. It all painted the same picture. By the time the closing statements were made, Sabrina's mask had completely shattered. When the verdict came, guilty of charges of extortion and corporate fraud, she didn't cry. She simply looked at Ethan, eyes blazing, lips trembling with something between hatred and sadness. As the guards led her away, she turned back to him and whispered, "You think you've won, but redemption doesn't erase who you were." He held her gaze calmly. "No, but it lets me start over." Outside, the press swarmed again, but Ethan ignored them. He walked down the steps into the biting wind, the first snowflakes drifting over the city. He passed a Tiffany storefront, rings glittering under soft yellow light, and thought of Clara's wedding ring, the one she had left on their kitchen counter the night she disappeared. That night, Holt called. "You did the right thing," he said. "She'll serve time. The story is fading. Clara's name is clean again." "I didn't do it for the headlines, you see," Ethan said. "I know, but the world loves a redemption arc. People are already calling you the man who burned his empire to rebuild his soul." Ethan almost laughed. "I'm not rebuilt, not yet." After hanging up, he looked at the skyline glowing under the snow. He thought of Cornwall, the quiet waves, the little clinic, his son's laughter. For the first time, the city that once defined him felt small. A week later, a letter arrived at Clara's cabin. Unsigned, just one sentence written in Ethan's hand. "It's gone. You are free." Clara read it twice, her fingers trembling. Then she folded it neatly and put it away in the wooden box where she kept the unsent letters, her silent archive of everything they had survived. Outside, the tide came in soft and steady, and somewhere miles away, a man walked alone in the snow, no longer running from his past, only toward the possibility of grace. Chapter 13. The Rooftop Garden. Spring arrived late to New York that year. For months, the city had worn a gray coat. But on this morning, sunlight poured over the streets like a promise. Ethan Cole adjusted his tie in the mirror, barely recognizing the man who looked back. He was no longer the Tom Ford-suited multimillionaire. He was no longer the tabloid disgrace. Newspapers now called him something different. The man who rebuilt with honor. It had been 6 months since Sabrina's sentencing. 6 months since Ethan stepped away from the world that adored money and applause. In that time, he had sold his last property, liquidated what remained of his assets, and donated every penny to the Noah Cole Foundation for Child Health, named after his son. The board of Mount Sinai Hospital in New York, where the main conference would be held, had invited him and Clara to speak at the inauguration ceremony of the new pediatric wing. He hadn't seen her in person since Cornwall. Letters had replaced words, their messages slow and cautious, filled with wounds that were stitched but not yet healed. Now, backstage in the hospital's bright marble lobby, he felt his pulse accelerate as the presenter spoke her name. Please welcome Clara Morgan Cole, founder of the Portside Clinic and co-chair of the Noah Foundation. Applause filled the room. She walked onto the podium, radiant in a simple navy dress, her hair falling loose over her shoulders. She looked nothing like the woman he had left. She looked like the woman she was always meant to be. Clara began to speak, her voice steady, measured. When we built this wing, it wasn't just about saving lives. It was about rebuilding faith in ourselves, in compassion, in the idea that people can change. She paused, then looked directly at him through the crowd. Even those who have lost everything. The audience murmured softly. Ethan's throat constricted. For a moment, the world was silent between them. When it was his turn, he walked to the podium slowly, his hands shaking slightly. I've spent most of my life building things that touch the sky, he said. Skyscrapers, companies, empires. But they all collapsed because I forgot what mattered on the ground. My wife reminded me, through her strength, her silence, her mercy, that the greatest legacy a man can leave is not made of steel or glass. It is made of forgiveness. There was no applause at first, only stillness. The kind that meant people were listening. Then the sound grew, wave after wave, until the whole room stood in ovation. After the ceremony, he found Clara standing alone by the hospital's rooftop garden. The city stretched out below them, bathed in gold. Noah played nearby with a nurse, laughing, the kind of laughter that once seemed impossible. You spoke beautifully, she said without turning around. I meant every word, he replied. Clara looked at him, her expression unreadable. People are calling you a hero now. Ethan shook his head. Heroes don't destroy the things they love. She smiled faintly. Perhaps heroes are just people who learn too late, but try anyway. They stood in silence, the wind brushing past them. Then she said softly, I didn't think you would come today. I had to, he admitted. I needed to see the life you built without me. Clara turned to him fully. It wasn't without you, Ethan. It was because of you. Because losing you forced me to become stronger. Her honesty cut deeper than any insult, yet it also healed something in him. As the sun began to set, the three of them, father, mother, and son, stood together for the first time without fear. Clara reached out, her fingers brushing his. He'll be old enough to understand someday, she said softly. When he asks who you are, what should I tell him? Ethan's voice was low, firm. Tell him I am a man who forgot what love was and spent the rest of his life learning how to deserve it. Epilogue. The weight of gratitude. The air outside Mount Sinai Hospital vibrated with the warmth of spring. The kind of New York morning that smelled of fresh coffee and second chances. Flags snapped in the breeze over the grand entrance. the Noah Cole Pediatric Wing. A new beginning. A year after that day, Ethan and Clara met in Porto, the place where everything had fallen apart. On the terrace of the River Cafe, the restaurant where they had their first anniversary dinner, the sky shone over the Douro River. "Do you still miss the power?" Clara asks. He shakes his head. "I used to chase the applause. Now I chase the quiet, and I learned the quiet can be loud in all the right ways." Noah runs up to them with a drawing. "Dad, look! A dragon!" Ethan lifts him into his arms, laughing. "A strong dragon, just like you." Clara watches them, the setting sun reflecting in her eyes. She reaches out, touching Ethan's hand. "You didn't have to wait for it. Sometimes life surprises you." And for the first time in his life, Ethan didn't feel like he had won a battle or closed a deal. He felt something far rarer: peace. It was the quiet, shaky rebirth of trust, reflection, and call to action. Friends, this is a story about the true cost of blind ambition. Ethan Cole lost everything: his empire, his reputation, his family, to finally find what mattered. Tell us in the comments, what was the most shocking moment of Ethan's downfall? Do you think his redemption is sincere or just a sophisticated form of atoning for his guilt? Remember, no matter how far you fall, you can always rebuild. If this saga of betrayal and forgiveness moved you, be sure to hit like and subscribe to our channel for more stories that remind us that healing begins the moment we decide to face our own reflection. Share this story with someone who needs to know it's not too late.